Well, that was a powerful, powerful song. And it couldn't be a better lead-in to what I hope to share with you today. First of all, I'll get to the right slide here. A couple key words just stand out so profoundly for me. This aspect of keep our eyes on Jesus. I think that's our ultimate task. How do we see the world through the eyes of Jesus? And then the comments about following in Jesus' footsteps. That's really what this faith formation process is all about. How do we become lifelong, intentional followers of Jesus Christ? And how do we do it in this day and age? Because I think we can all agree probably that life's a little bit different than it was 50 years ago or even 100 years ago. And I want to frame some of the context of what it means to be a lifelong follower of Christ in this day and age. And so you'll see up on the screen here this question that we often ask congregations. What time is it in the life of the church? And I'll preface it with a comment from Phyllis Tickle, one of our board members, who wrote a book called The Emergent Church, or The Great Emergence. And one of the quotes she uses in her book, The Great Emergence, is that every 500 years, the church goes through a rummage sale. And we're in that process right now. Because in this 500-year hinge of history, she talks about there's certain things that worked really well 50 years ago, 10 years ago, etc., that don't work now. And yet, how do we stay true to the gospel message, the good news, sharing the love of Christ with other people in this day and age? Because it looks different than what we saw 10 years ago. So I want to highlight some of our challenges. And by the way, how many of you would say this is a challenging time for the church? That looks like that's pretty much agreed on. Okay. How many of you would agree with this then? How many of you would say this is a tremendous opportunity for the church? And about the same, because that's what I really want you to think about. I think one of the greatest gifts the church brings larger society is the gift of hope. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to make a difference in the lives of other people, to share the love of Christ, to experience God in our own lives, to help people experience God through a sense of belonging, living into their gifts and their passions, and serving other people. So let's take a moment just to take a look at, oh, that's right, I'm the one that has to move it forward. So there's 5 things I just want to lift up here. First of all, just the end of the Christendom era. Back in the 1950s, I remember a fellow saying that, we could not help but grow because the church was the center of society, the community. And quite frankly, there wasn't all these soccer camps and everything else that we were competing with. So if people wanted to be invested, get to know people, they joined the church. But we don't live in that day and age anymore. And kind of the same with that, competing activities. I know in about 2 hours, my son's heading off to soccer practice. And my next door neighbor, they already left early this morning for hockey practice. And so we have different competing loyalties for where people spend their time, their money, their energies. And we need to acknowledge that. But what I also want you to think about, so often we get focused on just how does this impact the church, and we need to tend to that. But this is also a critical issue just for society at large. You ask any other organizations, you look at schools, other things. People struggle with people's short-term commitments. They struggle with some of the transitions and the blended lifestyles and all the things that just sometimes make life a little more messy than it was in the past. And so it's not just the church that's experiencing some of this turmoil, it's society at large, and we need to acknowledge that. We also, I don't know if you've heard the term that spiritual but not religious. There's been many times where people have in some ways been burned by the church or have had difficult experiences, and it's hard for them to come back, yet they still have a longing to experience God. They have a longing to be part of an authentic community. They have a longing to use their gifts in service to other people. And so we need to be attentive to how we reach out to that. We also need to help people understand that faith formation is something that we practice each and every day. It's not something we do just Sunday morning or Wednesday night. And if we just think that it's a Sunday morning experience, then we kind of forget about it until we come back, we miss the boat. And that's sometimes where we get the experience that our faith is irrelevant because we don't think about it. It doesn't dictate or guide our conversations and our actions throughout the week. So I really want to encourage you to think about how do we practice faith each and every day. And also we become, as part of our society, and there again, not just the church, but basically we hire people to do our work. But if we go back to the apostolic days, the birth of the church in the book of Acts, we learn that basically people gathered in people's homes, they prayed for each other, they shared meals together, they served each other. But we didn't have paid pastors, we didn't have paid youth workers and children's ministers, and sometimes we can feel like we get off the hook if we can just pay people. And really what we are charged with, Ron and Nicole and Eric and others, the charge is how do we use these fine individuals to be, in essence, our spiritual trainers? How do they equip us to help us discover our gifts, to experience God, and to bring that good news to other people? So their real primary job is to be spiritual trainers, just like some of us might have physical trainers. And then I want to show you one other slide here. But this means that we have to have a different understanding, because so often we get focused on membership. But I think the real question we should be asking is, how are we helping people go deeper in their faith? Not just become better members, but how do we help them discover, develop, and deploy their gifts in service to other people? We should be asking each individual that type of question. So the issue is really about discipleship, not membership. The issue is also not just about how do we get people to come into the doors here. There's some unique things that we can do as a congregation when we come together and worship corporately, share each other's gifts, pray for one another, things like that. I don't want to discount that. But also, the church is really, I would say, is a who rather than a what. It's not just simply that we come to church, we come to do these things. It's not just a place. It's really a who. It's us as people of God that we go out into the world. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, we are the church. That's why we talk about home as church too. And in our cars can be church too. In our communities we can be church too. The fact of the matter, though, what we've learned from the apostolic church, the birth of the church, we are charged with going out and sharing God's news. So it doesn't end here. And we also talk about it's not about filling slots and just filling what the needs are of the institution, but really helping people discover their call, their passion, and where does that intersect with the needs of society. We talk about this maintenance to mission. There again, the mission, really every single church, we spend a lot of time talking about mission in our council meetings. But in essence, what we're seeking to fulfill is God's mission. In essence, the mission is God's, and He fulfills the mission through the church. So our mission, in essence, is how do we help build the kingdom of God? That's really the core element. And finally, this aspect of deciding versus discerning. We invite the congregational leaders to think about their role as being spiritual elders. And I invite you to think about that too. Because it's not only important that our leaders think about what does it mean to be a lifelong follower of God, or where is God leading us? How do we live into God's preferred future? But we need to ask that individually as well. So I challenge you to think about what are the gifts that God has bestowed upon you? How are you using those in service to other people? And how does that make a difference in the lives of others? I want to lift up 2 things, and then you're going to hear a story from Nicole. But as we look at 3 decades of research on what forms faith, there's really 2 key things that stand out. The first piece is significant people. And how many of you have had a parent that has had a profound impact on your faith? A mom or dad? Quite a few hands. How many of you have had a grandparent that has had a profound impact on your faith? Quite a few of you. How about a pastor? Quite a few there too. How about an aunt or uncle or some relative? The fact of the matter is, as we think about growing into our faith, there's usually certain individuals, the way they talked about their faith, how they lived it out, how they interacted with us, they challenge us to say, I think I need to think about who this Jesus is a little bit more intentionally in my life. Who is God? What does it mean to follow? So people is really significant. The next piece is this practices piece. And do we have anyone that worked out this morning? Probably working out with shoveling. Okay, a little bit right here. Well, what I want you to think about, and you hear everyone's New Year's resolutions. The fact of the matter is, if we want to get stronger muscles, if we want to get rid of the gut, things like that, we have to exercise. Our exercise leads us to a better built body, more health, more vitality. And somehow we forget that we have to do the same thing for our spiritual life. And one of the things that's unique about the text today on the Transfiguration in the book of Luke is that it lifts up how Jesus was very intent on praying, being attentive to God's will and how God was guiding us. And so I think one of the things that we need to look at is how do we pay attention to the things, what I would call the means of grace. How are we ushered into God's presence? And I would advocate that's through prayer, it's through reading of Scripture, it's through dialoguing with other individuals, it's through acts of service, it's taking time to pause and just recognize that God is present in our lives. But the fact of the matter is, just like we seek to lift weights to grow our muscles, we have to pray and read and converse with other people to grow spiritually as well. And that's a choice that each and every one of us needs to take. So as you're thinking about that, I'd like to invite Nicole to come forward. She's going to share a little bit about what this faith community has meant to her and how that has led to her growing in her spiritual maturity. Nicole?
My name is Nicole Matchek, and I'm Youth Ministry Director. And for those of you who don't know me, I actually grew up here at Associated. I became active in our children's program when I was younger, through the children's choir, and especially through church school, which I had the pleasure of having my parents teach quite a few of my classes. And through that, I learned a couple of things of that. I learned the importance of giving time to your church when you have the time and you have the gifts and abilities to be able to do that. And I learned that it's okay to ask questions about your faith, that it's good to ask questions about your faith. And I also enjoyed being able to spend that extra time with them. That was something that I look forward to every single week on Sunday, being able to sit in class with my parents and my friends, because I had most of my friends from school were kids I was in Sunday school with as well. As I grew older, some of you might be familiar with our former youth ministry director, Bev Modlin. Bev and I were very close. Bev was here when she came when I was in 2nd grade, and she left my 8th grade year. And through that, we became very close. Bev taught me a lot about my faith. She always pushed me to ask the deep questions. And she always made me feel valued and important. No matter what, even when I was doing stupid stuff I knew I shouldn't be doing and getting into trouble, and some of the kids know some of my stories, the stuff I did. But she always made me think about what was the deeper purpose there, or what was I supposed to learn from the situation? What was God trying to teach me in that situation? And she always made me feel like the most valued person in that room. And it's because of Bev that I chose to go into ministry. I can't say enough about how much I learned from her. I learned about God from her, and how much she pushed me to keep going. By the time I got to high school, I was an active part of our youth group, which at that point was 6th through 12th grade, and Wednesdays were my favorite part of the week. Even if I wasn't feeling well, the deal with my parents was you had to go to school in order to go to youth group on Wednesdays. And even if I didn't feel good, I guarantee you I went to school on Wednesdays, because there was no way I wasn't going to youth group on Wednesday night. I forced myself to go to school so I could go see my friends, because my friends at church were my friends at school. They were my family. My youth group leaders were my second set of parents. They were the ones that I came to when I had other questions. They were the ones that I went to get Bible verses from when I needed more advice. And one of those that really sticks out would be Red Herstead, who's still involved in our program, especially now his 3 kids are getting older. Red was always there for a good laugh, still is, always has good jokes. But Red always found the best verses, always had great advice, and was another one of those people that always, what's the deeper meaning here? Always pushed you to look deeper at what is God trying to tell you, what is God trying to make you see in this situation. And was good at lightening the mood also. My whole life has been centered around this church. I was baptized here, confirmed here, married here, and now that my husband and I are raising our son here, I want this church and this congregation to be his second home as well. And I want that feeling to be the same for all of the children and youth in our congregation now and in the future. I want them to have that feeling that I get when I walk into this building, and when I see the faces that I see here, that I want them to know that they are loved, and this is a safe place to experience God and to ask those questions and to have that. And that's why I just feel so blessed not only to have grown up in this congregation, but to be able to work with our children and youth here and to work with all of you, because I know that this is exactly where I want Declan and our kids to be raised. And I'm so blessed to work with all of your kids. So, thank you.
So how many of you want that for your own children, your grandchildren, anyone that comes through this door, that they have a friend, they're seeing the role modeling. Isn't that what we're trying to create, what I would call a sticky congregational culture, where people just say, whatever is going on here, I want it. I just sense God's presence. I feel welcomed. I feel valued. How do we create that culture? And I think it boils down to where we talk about AAA transformation, and we talk about, Eric talked about the AAA part, this authentic, available, and affirming. I want to challenge you to think about how each and every one of you might actually become that AAA person. And I think it becomes, first of all, is when we realize, and I'll even put this one up, that I'm going to go right here. I'm going to put this up about another person. I think there we go. I want you to think, first of all, the understanding that you can make a difference. If we don't buy into the assumption that somehow God can use me to be a transforming presence in our homes, in our congregations, in our communities, we won't rise to the occasion. So that's a basic assumption that I want to make. And then the other question is how do we make that difference, especially for young people? I think we need to understand is we have a multitude of opportunities each and every day. And there's a fellow by the name of Reggie McNeil that says that our job is to find at least 3 ways each day to be a source of blessing to other people. Because we understand that in Christ we make a difference. We are that blessing. We are the ones that bring God's love to our communities, to our home settings. But we need to claim it. It's a choice. And so I want you to think about it. This woman up here that you see, her name is Myrtle Hollister. She joined a congregation I served in Minneapolis. And she was 82 years old. She was a retired elementary Sunday school teacher. And she came and she said, I want to get involved in a ministry with children. What do you think we were thinking of, how we'd involve her? Any idea? Sunday school, teaching, things like that. That's certainly a passion. She said, no, I don't want to do that. I've done that for years. She said, I just want to do it my way. Are you okay with that? And we thought, well, 82 years old, she can't do too much damage here. We're not really taking a big risk here. So let's go for it. So Myrtle Hollister, her ministry was literally standing outside the main entrance of the church. And she would get down on her knees like this, which was probably a little difficult for her. But she'd go and she'd greet each person that came up and said, good morning, I'm Myrtle Hollister. It's a pleasure to meet you. And she'd look for anyone under 48 inches tall. She'd introduce herself. And she'd give them a tic-tac. She'd say, I'm going to be praying for you this week. Do you have any special prayer concerns? I'm going to be looking for you next week. And lo and behold, after about probably 4 to 6 weeks, we started having these 2 receiving lines coming into the church. All these young people looking to have a blessing for Myrtle. It wasn't so much the tic-tac or the gummy bear, but it was literally they wanted that blessing. They want to be named. And I can't tell you what an incredible gift it is when we can name other people's call them by name and to know what's going on in their life. In fact, I would say one of the big things that I hope that you come away from this saying, part of this AAA transformation is that we truly get to know each other. Because we can't pray for people as well when we don't even know their names. We don't know what issues are going on. But Myrtle knew every single person's name. She knew what was going on in their life. In fact, we'd hear comments where saying, well, we can't skip church today. Myrtle's going to be waiting for me. That's a profound thing. And I hope that you think about how might you be a Myrtle to your next door neighbor? How might you be a Myrtle to your grandchild or godchild? How might you be a Myrtle to one of the children here? And it's not just befriending, but we can do that through our gifts of generosity in time and money. We can do it by praying for other individuals. We can do it by sharing our own faith story. Because one of the things that we don't have time for this morning, but one thing I want you to think about, part of this transformation is leadership is all about influence. And there's certain individuals that inspire us. And one of the things that is lacking for young people is that they don't hear older people talk about their faith or how they continue to grow. Sometimes there's a perception that we get confirmed and then our education is done. We should be looking at confirmation as a launching pad, a springboard to a life of lifelong faith formation. How do we change it? The way we change it is by sharing our stories to how we, whether we're 40, 50, 70, continue to grow in our faith. We need to share our stories. So how can you be a source of hope, a source of inspiration to other people? How might you continue to grow and pray and read and share how you're growing in your faith to be a source of inspiration? That's my challenge for you. And the last slide I want to show with you here, if I get it there, is there again, we can choose to live out of our excuses. We can think about we're in this turbulent time. What can we do? We're struggling. Our membership's declining. Let's focus on our strengths and the possibilities. You have a beautiful building. You have wonderfully talented people. You got a great musical ministry. You got lots of young people. Take advantage of it. Make sure that you make a difference with each and every person. Make sure that you're using your gifts and talents to service to other people. When we claim that for ourselves and wonder how God might use us today, this week, this coming year, that's when we become a AAA transformation type of church. And I challenge each and every one of you to listen to that call and to act on it each and every day. Amen.